Don't make a business decision based off of an emotional thing that really, you're going to live with that tool for a while. This is usually a multi-million-dollar investment once you factor in implementation services and so forth. You want to make sure you're getting the best solution out there, regardless of the individual personalities involved that it might take to get there.
Welcome to another edition of the ITAM Executive. We're happy to be with you today. I'm Steve Hastings. I'm here with my colleague, Kris Johnson. Welcome.
Yeah, it's good to be together, Steve.
We thought we'd talk a little bit today about selecting a SAM technology and the RFP process and the selection process that goes around that. It can be a real challenge to differentiate between some of these technology providers and also to match it up with your use cases, right?
Yeah, we know a thing or two about responding to RFPs. In fact, we have a different podcast episode on that topic, which you might want to check out. But we also have a lot of experience helping clients on the other side, developing the RFP, administering the RFP, and then doing the analysis and the adjudication to narrow down on the selection. And that process, just like with selecting a managed service provider, is fraught with frustration and difficulty, and sometimes can even result in a selection of a technology, in this case, that because of the mechanics of the process led to sort of a wrong outcome or a suboptimal outcome than what would have been better for the organization. So,
right. A lot of times, a lot of companies are they're only looking at the tool, right? And they're not thinking about what do I have to put around that technology to make it successful, right? To make the investment valuable, right?
Yeah. IT organizations know how to budget for tools, right? It's part of their DNA.
Yeah.
They're really usually terrible about budgeting for putting together the processes and policies and controls in place that are actually a necessary foundation to get value out of that tool.
Correct.
Because a tool by itself isn't going to fix all your process problems.
Yeah.
If anything, it might shine a light on where they're broken, which can have its place, right? To, create a business case for why your request process needs to be streamlined or your deployment process isn't standardized enough and so forth. But there's some level of groundwork that needs to be laid before you really have any business trying to go out and buy a tool that's going to try and automate some of these things.
Yeah, we usually use the analogy of building a house, right? You have tools for building a house. You have saws and hammers and things like that, right? But you also need skilled people to swing the hammers, and you need blueprints to make sure you're building it correctly. You have to layer the right foundation, have the right materials in place, and then that tool can be very effective, right? It can be very important in terms of helping the build to go faster and helping the program to be better, but it needs to be put in the right context.
Yeah, perfect analogy, right? You can have the best tools in the world, but without the artisans necessary to get use out of them, you're not going to have the outcome or the house that you're anticipating.
That's right.
And like, we've said for years, right? A fool with a tool is still a fool.
Yeah. Right?
The tool doesn't instantly make you more intelligent or a better IT asset manager. Right?
Yeah.
You have to know what's the job to be done by that tool. What are you asking that tool to do for you? And how can you, make sure that it has that capability to provide that job? And how can you as an operator make sure that you're getting that use?
You have to be able to get to business outcomes, right? Business decisions that you can make from the data. And I would argue that if you don't budget for those things up front, it's going to hurt you down the road, right? Yeah. You will get to a place where your data is ineffective, where you can't make good decisions, where you don't have the trust of other parts of the organization because you didn't do the groundwork up front to lay that. So,
there's a lot we could talk about on this topic. I'm just thinking about some experiences that we've had ourselves of like obvious things you probably shouldn't do. One example, real example, working with a client, they didn't want to include a particular tool in the population of potential tools, right, to get information about and maybe get potential bids from, because the individual, the ITAM director, had a bad personal a bad personal relationship with a sales rep in one region of that company.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Kind of some bad blood, right?
Yeah.
That's a terrible reason to
not get info,
not select somebody. It's like, I really like this car over here. It's probably the best car that's out there, but because I don't like that salesperson, I'm never going to get that car. It's just ludicrous, right? Well, get a different salesperson, right? Don't make a business decision based off of an emotional thing that really, you're going to live with that tool for a while. This is usually a multi-million-dollar investment once you factor in implementation services and so forth, especially that you want to make sure you're getting the best solution out there, regardless of, the individual personalities involved that it might take to get there. Another one, just kind of a war story. Went through a complete RFP process for a tool. It was resulted in a pretty clear winner after some objective adjudication criteria vis-a-vis the requirements that were gathered in advance. And then it went to senior management that had sponsored the exercise, and they completely disregarded any of the objective data and said, "I'm going with this one because." I know these people, right? We've done business with them before in the past. Well, okay, but we've gone through this process to look at what your needs are, put those into detailed requirements, went through a very detailed adjudication process, including, some proof of concepts, and here were the results of that process. These tools don't have these functionalities, right? These tools do not perform like these ones do over here, right? This executive barely even paid any attention to that, right? And just went off of gut feel of who they worked with in the past.
They already knew who they wanted in their mind, right?
Terrible way to select a tool. Like in the very least, if that's what you're going to do, then save yourself and the bidders a bunch of pain and effort to go through that process and just make your sort of biased gut feel decision without all of that, right? At least own your bias.
How do you feel about proof of concepts for tools? Like, should that be part of the RFP process? Like, should you get obviously any proof of concept, the tool vendor is going to try their best to shine a light on the things they do well, right? But should you be doing POCs? Is that something?
That's a great question. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I would have said absolutely.
Okay.
Today, there's enough differentiation in the tools out there that you don't need to go through a full POC process. Now, a POC can have a very good purpose if it's sort of try before you buy. We can talk about when it's appropriate, when it's probably not.
Okay.
But to get good differentiation on the tool, sometimes, so the POC itself, most organizations don't want to pay for the proof of concept. Most bidders don't want to offer it for free.
Right.
So what you get is this kind of mold over thing that doesn't help anybody, right?
Yeah, it's very curated. It's very
it was a waste of time for them. You didn't get any good information about it because it's fake data, right? Or it's just a very small subset. You don't really get any lasting value out of it. What is more effective, and how I would answer that today, is it's a process that we take our clients through. I call it a technical capabilities verification process. Which colloquial we call it a tool evisceration. This is where we kick out the sales reps.
Okay.
We only invite product people.
Okay. Yeah.
And we give them very detailed things of capabilities they're going to need to demonstrate. And demonstrate with real data, not dummy data. And there's no points given for, I'm going to have to get back to you on that, or I don't have that level of detail. You darn well better have the technical experts in the room that can answer the questions that are not at the salesy, surfacey level. And we really get to the heart at not just what the tool does, but how it does it, right? When you have the background like that we do when it comes to things like, license consumption analysis with obscure products, right? Usually the salespeople, they only know enough to be able to sell it and say, oh yeah, we do that. Yeah, we do. We cover Oracle. Yeah. Okay, well, what products of Oracle? Well, all of them? No, you don't. Database. Yeah, well, database. Yeah. Okay. Well, what about these other ones here? Yeah. They don't know, right? So you've got to kick them out of the room.
Yeah.
Sorry, salespeople, but you've got to get the technical folks, which may be pre-sales, maybe the product leaders, to really get at how are they actually doing these things? Because there's some methods that are better than others when it comes to some of these things, right?
Yeah, sure.
As well as you have to establish, what does the tool not do? Because if you can't establish what the tool does not do, you fundamentally don't understand what it does do.
Yeah.
You ask people what it does do, they'll tell you stuff, but in the end, you kind of really don't know.
Yeah.
So it's got to be validated, and it's all show me, and you award points for transparency, right? I don't know, or our tool doesn't do that, is a perfectly acceptable answer. We want to know. We're trying to drive at where the limits are. And if we never establish what those limits are, then the process isn't functioning.
That's a good point. I mean, these best-in-class tools, there's a lot of great technology, right? They've spent years developing some really good technologies that can help in a mature SAM program, right? But they need to be transparent about where those limits end. And maybe there's a development roadmap for some of these other features, but the buyer needs to know that up front, right? They need to be able to differentiate between all of these options.
And really getting into the technical weeds, an example, sometimes there's these requirements that an organization has that they latch onto, and the tool has to do this. Yeah. Like it has to integrate with this other tool, or it has to, integrate with this credential manager.
Right.
And, the bidders are just looking to get the box checked. So do you do that? Well, yeah, we do that.
Yes or no.
Meaning they've gotten it to work as a custom development on one customer over here, but it's not a flagship part of their product. You need to be able to peel back those layers, as well as be real as an organization. Like, how truly important is that? Because I've worked in some situations where that must-have functionality, when it gets time to implementation and we're helping them with that, we peel back the covers and it actually doesn't work, or doesn't work the way that you thought it did, and we actually don't end up implementing that piece of it, and it's just fine. Yeah. Right? Because it performs in all these other ways that they were more important. But sometimes you get a security person, IT architect in there that's beating the drumbeat on this piece or that piece of integration, and so you really need to grapple with what are your true must-haves, rank them, and go through an exercise like the one I mentioned that really validates and verifies the technical capabilities. Which, in my experience, you can do that in a very short amount of time. Yeah. With a better result than a lengthy POC that wastes a lot of time.
That's a good point, right? Because if you do it the right way, a typical tooling RFP can take 6, 9, sometimes 12 months or longer, right? In order to get all of that figured out, right? But we can help clients select a tool in 4 to 6 weeks just by streamlining that process. And as you said, it's really important to understand what your requirements are up front and their priorities, right? Must-haves, nice-to-haves. We don't really need this today. Maybe we need it next year, right? It's all kinds of things.
I do this all day long, right? We've gotten it kind of down to about 10 questions, right? Depending on how you answer these 10 questions, I can tell you what tool is likely going to best match up with what you're needing, as well as the trajectory of that tool. Are you going to be happy with that investment 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road? Because, there's been a lot of consolidation in the SAM tooling industry. There's a lot of platform builders and players that are out there, and whether those strategies align with what you're needing out of your tool and what the sort of destination of your ITAM program is can weigh heavily in some of those decisions.
Yeah, and there's a lot of technologies out there that are sort of tangential to what a true SAM tool would do, right? Endpoint management and other different kinds of platforms that may say they have elements of software asset management or IT asset management, but really they're not in the same class as some of these more robust IT asset management technologies. Yeah,
I'm just thinking it might be interesting for folks to hear about some of our experience with, once a tool is selected, kind of the do's and don'ts of implementation and what to expect going into it. Because, for every customer, for every organization we've seen with a tool, we've seen an organization with a substandard implementation and use of that tool.
Yeah.
In full disclosure, Anglepoint works with most all, if not all, over some period, with tool vendors and advising them on their product roadmaps, on specific functionalities that don't work right, or they need our expertise to try and build into those tools. So we have some pretty intimate knowledge of where the skeletons in the closet really are. And, in working with some of those tool vendors, it's surprising, some of the metrics that we're able to gather or privy to of, how they're not adopted very well within an organization. I remember this is been years ago, but I remember one such tool provider disclosing to us saying, "Hey, we have a good install base, but when we run the metrics, we find that the number of publishers that our customers actually use our tool to manage is 1.2.
That's hard.
1.2.
Nothing is more sad than going into a client where a technology has been in place to find that it's basically shelfware, right? That the data isn't trusted, right? That no one is actually using it, that the dashboards aren't helpful, that the connections are bad, right? That you have poor coverage in the environment, right? I mean, that is just it's a wasted investment, right? And as you mentioned, these technologies are not cheap, right? And so it pays to get it right the first time.
Yeah, there's more value to gain by even selecting a substandard tool, but implement it very, very well, then select the best tool in the world and implement it very, very poorly.
That's really well said, right? Because that implementation stage is so important, right? And if you can do that correctly, then you can get a lot of value out of it. And as an ITAM director, an ITAM leader, right, really what you're trying to do is become a service to the business, right? And make sure that business stakeholders from IT and from infrastructure and from procurement can come to you for good, solid data, right? And your technology, your tool is a really important part of that.
Yeah, lots more we could talk about maybe for a different session, but thank you for joining us, and we'll come back to you hopefully soon enough.
Yeah, thanks very much.
You've been listening to the ITAM Executive, brought to you by Anglepoint. Make sure to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player and give us a rating. Thanks for being part of the ITAM community. Until next time.